Hello, I'm Marie McCoy, Director of Christian Voices for Life. Welcome to Voice for Life training. Thank you so much for taking the time to look at this presentation. I hope you enjoy it and will learn a lot from it. If you would like a printed copy of the slides to review or to follow along and make notes while you listen, that document is available on our website. The purpose of this training is to equip participants to confidently present the truth on life topics and effectively engage pro-choice contacts to listen to the pro-life view. We also want to prepare volunteers to represent Christian Voices for Life at fair booths and tables. Whether you become an official representative of Christian Voices for Life at a table or booth, or just engage in conversation with the people you have contact with, you can become a Voice for Life volunteer, helping people to appreciate the value of every life and understand the great harm that is done by abortion. For more information about becoming a Voice for Life volunteer, please see the documents on our website, Becoming a Voice for Life Volunteer. This video is part 1 of the Voice for Life training. We will talk about audiences, attitudes, and general strategies. In part 2, we will talk more specifically about the real issue involved in the abortion debate and how to answer specific pro-choice arguments. In order to be a representative of Christian Voices for Life at one of our tables, we would like you to be as informed as possible on several topics, so we strongly recommend that you read some of the basic material available on our website. A list of the recommended reading is found in the document Becoming a Voice for Life Volunteer. Topics include coerced abortion, abortion techniques, contraception, fetal development, in vitro fertilization and naprotechnology, and post-abortion consequences and healing. And of course, even if you're just talking to a friend, these issues may come up, and it would be helpful for you to have as much knowledge as you can about them. In every case, we are consistently respecting the life of every child from the moment of conception, that is, fertilization, when the egg and sperm join together to form a new human being, whether that fertilization takes place naturally or in a lab. In part 1, as I mentioned earlier, we will talk about audiences, attitudes to maintain, and general strategies. First of all, if you are speaking with someone who is involved in a crisis pregnancy, whether it is the person themselves or someone close to them, this is usually not the time to debate abortion. Rather, you want to minister to a person in need. You want to show compassion for them with the difficulties they're facing and help them to connect to the help they need to make a good decision. This is a time to talk about being fully informed about all the options and to focus on trying to get the person involved to a pregnancy center, where people have the training and experience to be able to give them the help they need. You want to show that you care about the mother and want to help her. You don't want anyone to think that all you care about is the baby, or that you are condemning someone for even considering abortion if you're focused on trying to convince them how wrong it is. In Fort Bend County, people can be referred to the Pregnancy Resource Medical Center for help. The option line is also available 24/7 and can refer callers to a local center anywhere in the U.S. or even in many other countries. If someone has been injured by a past abortion, you want to show compassion there as well. So many women are deceived or coerced into abortion and are just not able to find the help they need. They make that choice because they can't see what else to do, or it seems to be the best thing they can do. As time goes on after the abortion, they are more and more likely to deeply regret their choice. When they are in the middle of a pregnancy, the problems they are facing may seem so scary and so much more real than the child they cannot see or feel. But when those problems are gone, they are left with the fact that that was their child, their son or their daughter, and they need to mourn for that loss. Now the world is telling them that there is nothing to mourn, they shouldn't feel bad, but they do feel bad. If someone you are speaking to has had an abortion in the past, you can gently ask them, "How do you feel about the abortion now?" If they express regret, by all means let them know that God loves them and forgives them, and healing help is available. Post-abortion help is available at the Pregnancy Resource Medical Center in Fort Bend County or several other places, and the option line can also make referrals. If they do not express regret, they might say something like, "I try not to think about it," or I did what I had to do. They probably know deep down that it was wrong, but they don't want to face it. You might still ask if they thought it might be good to be able to talk about it in a safe place where they would not be judged. Maybe listen and talk to other women who have been through that experience. You can let them know that such places do exist. There are local programs, or the Option Line can refer her to a program anywhere in the country, so you could give her an Option Line business card. If she seems willing to continue to talk, or you might ask, is it okay if I ask you some questions about your experience? You might ask, what kind of situation were you in that you felt you needed to make that choice? That may bring out the whole story, but other questions you could ask are, what kind of support did you have during your pregnancy? How far along were you? Have you had any physical problems after your abortion? How did you feel about abortion before you got pregnant? If a friend of yours were to come to you for advice, would you encourage her to have an abortion or to avoid it if she could? Listen to her answers and express sympathy for how hard it must have been for her. She has suffered a trauma and she needs healing. But the first step toward healing is for her to admit that it was wrong. So gently leading her a little closer to that is also helping her. Tell her again that there are programs to help or just people she could talk to when she decides she's ready. You might mention that some women feel that there must be something wrong with them if they have bad feelings about the abortion, but they are not alone. Millions of women eventually, sometimes not for many years, come to see the abortion as a terrible mistake. If appropriate, you could also let her know that she could come to you to talk about it if she wished. God has never stopped loving her, and if she is your friend, let her know that you have not stopped loving her either. Okay, so we've talked about situations where there's personal involvement with abortion and you want to focus on ministering to that person rather than debating with them. So what are the situations where you do want to enter into discussion about the morality of abortion? You could be among a group of people in some kind of a social gathering. Either abortion has come up as a topic, or maybe you have brought it up by asking someone what their opinion is on abortion. Just think for a minute about your friends and family members. Do you know what their opinions are on abortion? Maybe it has never come up in conversation. Or you may be staffing a table or a booth for Christian Voices for Life, and a total stranger comes up to the table to talk. And so I'm assuming that whether it is a social time or you're at a booth, you have some time to listen, to talk, without being rushed. If the topic comes up and you don't have time to deal with it, ask if you can meet with them another time to discuss the issue. Now, in some cases, you might start out discussing abortion with someone and you're not aware of any personal involvement, but in fact, there is personal involvement. It has been my experience that some people, not all, but some who are vehemently pro-abortion, are desperately trying to cling to their own innocence in regard to abortion, or to the innocence of someone close to them. If your mother or sister or wife had an abortion, you don't want to believe that she's guilty of a terrible wrong. You want to believe that, at least in her case, it was justified. People can be very good at convincing themselves to believe what they want to believe. Sometimes you may have a clue that the person you're talking to has some kind of a personal involvement in abortion if they're just not accepting your points. They don't seem to see the great logic of your arguments. They just want to keep trying to convince you that they are right. Stephanie Gray once talked to a student who kept asking questions about the case of rape. She was just not accepting her points. Finally, Stephanie had a hunch and mentioned that she had a friend who had been sexually abused when she was young. Pregnant or not, abortion or not, it was going to take a lifetime for her to heal from that trauma. The girl replied, "Yes, 10 years and counting." Stephanie immediately completely changed her focus from trying to convince her to ministering to her. "I am so sorry for your pain. Are you safe now?" So if you think someone you are talking to perhaps was involved with an abortion in the past, you could bring up the fact that abortion hurts the mother and the father. And it's sad that so many women are deceived or coerced and then come to really suffer from their mistake. But God never stops loving them, and there's help available for them to find healing and really know that they are forgiven. So you can just give them that information without accusing them or even asking them if they have had an abortion. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about staffing a table for Christian Voices for Life. I would like to have a booth at the Fort Bend County Fair each year in the fall and at the Needville Harvest Festival and perhaps other venues. If you are at a fair in Fort Bend County, you'll probably have more people stopping in to talk who are pro-life than are pro-choice. That's great. We certainly have lots of information to offer, and we would want to encourage them to sign up for our weekly email. They might be pro-life but not aware of the issues with in vitro fertilization or coerced abortion, or that hormonal contraception can also cause early abortions. So we still want to educate on all those issues. Generally, we don't want to bother everyone walking by calling out to them, but if they seem interested as they look to see what our display is about, it's certainly okay to talk to them to invite conversation. If you can tell that they are reading a particular part of the display, you can make a comment about that topic, such as, "Were you aware that birth control pills can cause the death of a newly conceived child?" Or, "Thank you for your interest in our display. May I ask your opinion about abortion?" Or just, "Do you have any questions about our display?" People who are pro-abortion but have come to the fair to have a good time may not want to bother to talk. But if they are alone and have some time, they may welcome the opportunity to express strong feelings. Hopefully, some who have not thought very much about the issue will learn something from the display and might be willing to enter into discussion. 2015 will be a year of getting experience and seeing how it goes. So let's suppose that you do get into a discussion with someone who is pro-abortion. What kind of attitudes do you need to have? Basically, the main thing to remember is to show love. First of all, you need to show love to the person you are speaking to. You do that in a couple of ways. First, you're willing to listen to them. You're not just waiting for them to finish talking so you can start talking. You really listen and try to understand what they are thinking and what they are feeling. A little while later, we will spend some time talking about active listening. Secondly, try to find common ground. This is very important. If you want someone to really listen to you, you want them to start thinking of you as someone who agrees with them, not someone who is an opponent on the other side of the issue. Although I used the word debate earlier, we really don't want to debate, but rather discuss. If you both treat the conversation as a debate to win, then you end up focusing on how best to make your points, but not really listening to the other person's points. You may even hesitate to agree with them on anything because you don't want to give them points toward victory. Rather, you do want to agree with them as much as you can. If they express concern for women in difficult situations, you want to affirm that yes, you are also concerned for women, that they deserve to be helped and supported. But you just think that the best way to help them is to help them to have their baby and make sure that both mom and baby are safe and have their needs met. This person who disagrees with you is not your enemy. You want to assume that he or she is a basically good person who wants to be fair. You want to establish yourself as a friend, not an adversary. There's a book called Common Ground Without Compromise that lists 25 questions that most pro-life and pro-choice people can agree on. For example, what do you think about late-term abortions? If they think those are bad, let them know you agree. You don't want to assume that just because they're pro-choice, that they're radically pro-choice and in favor of abortion up to the day before birth. But then maybe you can start a conversation about how late is late. Where do you draw a line? Or why are late-term abortions bad? So finding common ground is very important to starting a conversation where you're actually listening to each other. You want to stay calm and respectful as you speak, no matter what their opinion may be. You're trying to convey truth, not attack anyone. You don't want to express any kind of negative judgment against anyone. It may be helpful not to look them in the eye, which is more confrontational, but come alongside them to show them your printed material. Don't expect someone to immediately change their mind based on your so very logical reasoning. While it is possible for that to happen, especially if someone really hasn't given the matter much thought before, it is unlikely to happen if they have struggled with the issue and come down on the side of pro-choice for whatever reason. So just be content if they have listened to some good points and you have given them something to think about. They may have reasons to want to believe that abortion is okay, and they're just not ready to give up that belief. You want to show them respect by listening to them so that they will in turn be willing to listen to you. In addition to showing love and respect for the person you are speaking to, you also want to express your compassion for women in crisis pregnancies. Sometimes abortion is thought of as a case of mother's rights versus baby's rights. Whose side are you on? But we're not picking a side here. We want to help both mom and baby to get through whatever problems they're facing with the best possible outcome. We do feel that the child has the right to live and that we need to speak out for that right when they cannot speak for themselves. But we also feel that pregnant women deserve better help than being given permission to kill their children. If a single mom is struggling with the burden of caring for 2 or 3 children, should we offer her the option of killing one of them to make her life easier? Of course not. We would want to help her to find a way to care for all her children as well as herself. It is because we care about women that we do not want them to suffer the pain that so many women suffer after abortion. In the long run, abortion hurts women far more than it helps them. The longer the amount of time that passes after abortion, the more likely women are to express regret for their decision. The organization Silent No More helps post-abortive women to voice their testimonies, and many testimonies are posted online at their website. So I encourage you to go to their website, silentnomoreawareness.org, and listen to a few of those testimonies. Okay, let's address the question of whether to bring God into the conversation. It is definitely possible to defend the pro-life position without referring to God, just relying on our common human sense of morality. If someone is not a believer or is a nominal Christian, but God is not important in their lives, they may well be put off by bringing God into the discussion. They may say that you're just expressing a religious view that should not be forced on others. And so you would appeal simply to their belief in human rights. Remember, we want to find common ground that we can agree on. So, if they do not have a strong faith, I would not bring God into it. However, if you know that this person is a strong Christian, or they bring up God by saying they believe God would accept abortion out of compassion for women, you can definitely take advantage of that common ground of belief in God and talk about the Christian view of abortion. If you don't know what their faith is and they don't mention God, you can proceed without bringing up faith. However, if you feel that the Holy Spirit might be leading you in that direction, you could say something like, "May I ask if you are a practicing Christian?" and then proceed according to their answer. I do want to make one important point. Many Christian churches have moved in recent times from condemning abortion to accepting it. For over 1900 years, the historical position of all Christian churches was that abortion is wrong. The Catholic Church has remained faithful to that position, but many denominations have changed with the times to view abortion as acceptable, or even a right to be protected. Although the word abortion is not in the Bible, Holy Scripture makes clear that God is the author of life, and thou shalt not kill. But you cannot assume that a faith-filled Christian would be hearing the pro-life position at her church. All right, let's summarize what we've covered so far. If there is a personal involvement with a crisis pregnancy or abortion, that is not a time to discuss abortion in general, but to minister to that person. We have also said that abortion discussions may take place in a social situation or at a fair booth, but generally needs to be at a time when you have time to listen and talk. The main idea is to show love. You show love to the person you're speaking to by being willing to listen and finding common ground. You also want to express concern for women in crisis pregnancies and for post-abortive women. We've also said that respect for life can be defended without bringing God into the conversation, but you may certainly appeal to the Christian view when speaking to a Christian. Okay, there's a saying that nobody cares what you know until they know that you care. Nobody cares what you know until they know that you care. If you want someone to listen to you, first you listen to them. So let's talk about active listening. I'm sure some of you have already received training in active listening. Active listening is simply a way of listening that helps to make sure that you're really getting the full message of what the person you are listening to is communicating. Active listening means that you are making a conscious effort to hear not only the words, but the message, the feelings that they are communicating. Deciding to really listen is an important first step, but is only the first step. You can't just decide to be better at playing tennis, right? You have to learn some good ways of doing things, and you have to, what? Practice. There are also things that can be taught about being a good listener, and we all have opportunities to practice. Good listening is, of course, a valuable asset for marriage, for parenting, for any interpersonal relationship, because communication is important in relationships. One of the best books I know of about listening is called How to Talk So Kids Will Listen and Listen So Kids Will Talk. I read it many years ago, but it was updated in 2012. There's also a teen version, and I think every parent should read that book. I'm only going to take the time here to very briefly review the main elements of active listening. First, pay attention. Focus on what they are saying, not the missing button on their shirt or how you're going to respond or how wrong they are. Just what are they saying? It may help to repeat to yourself the words you hear. The problem is that we can think a lot faster than they can talk, so that leaves time for our mind to wander a bit. Secondly, let them know that you're really listening. You don't interrupt. You use eye contact, perhaps nodding appropriately, to let them know you understand. So eye contact and nodding is one type of feedback to let them know you are listening. But to also let them know you heard and understood, you can rephrase or reflect back to them what they just said. For example, we're going to Europe this summer, kids and all. Oh, you're taking the whole family to Europe. Wow. Or, after they've been talking for a while, summarize what they said. Okay, so next weekend your sister is coming, your son has a big game, and you really want to go to Kevin's concert. You do have a busy weekend ahead. You are keeping the focus entirely on what they said. So listening is about what they are saying, but also about what they are feeling. Sometimes you may sense strong feelings behind what they are saying, and it may be helpful to name those feelings. It sounds like you really feel strongly that a woman should have the right to end a pregnancy. You use a phrase such as, "it sounds like," because you can never really be sure of what they are feeling. You have to guess and let them either confirm it or explain. Well, at least in some situations, yes, a woman shouldn't have to continue a pregnancy that's going to ruin her life. So you haven't agreed with her, you've just let her know that you have really heard what she said. Giving feedback gives them permission to talk about their feelings instead of just the facts. After you've reflected back to them what they've already said, they are also very likely to add something more. Okay, another point is that you want to defer judgment. You don't have to agree with them, but just accept what they are saying. Let them finish, rather than jumping in immediately to correct them or offer a counter-argument. Of course, God tells us not to judge. Leave that to Him. Your task as you listen is to listen and understand. Non-judgmental acceptance can be difficult at times. It may help to say a little prayer as you listen. Jesus, help me to love and accept this person the way you do. Another good thing to do as an active listener is to ask good, open-ended questions, generally questions that do not have a short yes or no answer. So, you really care about the mother and how the pregnancy is going to affect her. That's the reflecting part, repeating what they told you. How much do you know about how abortion affects the mother? Of course, you can still ask some yes or no questions to get specific information. However, why do you think that, while being open-ended, can seem judgmental? So you want to phrase it a little differently. So, you think that a child within the womb is not a person with rights. What is the difference between the child after birth and the child before birth that makes one a person and the other not a person? Okay, so now we're going to talk about how to defend the pro-life position. This is called pro-life apologetics. It's not that we are apologizing about anything we've done wrong, but that's just what it's called when you defend a position. And while we want to start out on common ground, we do want to help them to eventually conclude that abortion is wrong. I want to immediately make clear that many of the ideas presented here are not original with me. I have relied on several sources to help me present good points. I'm not going to reference every idea as I go because I just want the presentation to flow smoothly. Listed on the slide are 3 websites of organizations that work in this area of pro-life apologetics and have resources and training available. I listed Justice for All first because they stress the importance of asking questions and listening in order to find common ground at the beginning of your conversation. On this slide, I've listed some books that I've looked at and a CD of a talk by Stephanie Gray. Now, there's no requirement here to go read all these things. I just want to give the references and let you know where to go if you do want to read more. One author, Scott Klusendorf, strongly emphasizes the fact that the abortion issue is really only about one thing. Imagine that a little boy comes into the house with a shoebox in his hands, and he asks his dad, "Can I kill this?" Now, my son never asked that question, but I have heard assurances that it's not that unusual. How would Dad answer? Well, he would probably say, "That depends on what it is. What is this thing you want to kill?" He can't answer the question until he knows what it is that the boy is talking about. If it's a cockroach, he might say, "Sure, you can kill that." But if it's a baby bird or a little kitten, he would probably say, "No, of course not." So if we can establish the common ground that it's always wrong to kill an innocent human person, no matter what kind of extenuating circumstances may exist, then if the preborn child is a human person, then it is wrong to kill him or her. And so we get to the real question. Is a preborn child a human being? That is, a human person with the right to life. If a child is a burden for a mother after birth, because she's too young, because she's poor, or whatever the situation may be, we don't allow mothers to kill their children to relieve themselves of that burden. And our position is that the child is just as real, just as alive, and just as human before birth as they are after birth, and so they should have the same right to life. So, one thing we want to keep in mind is that we want to somehow direct the conversation to the real question of what is the preborn child. What are some other general strategies that we want to remember? Stephanie Gray in her talk suggests that if we want to communicate well, we should look to the greatest communicator of all, Jesus Christ. When someone asked him a question, what did he often do? He asked them a question, and he told stories. For example, in Luke chapter 10, someone asks, "What must I do to gain eternal life?" Jesus answered with a question. What does the law say? Love God with all your heart and all your strength and all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. But then the man asked, "And who is my neighbor?" A man fell victim to robbers on the road to Jericho. Jesus tells a story that the listeners could relate to. The road to Jericho was well known to be dangerous, and when he talked about a Levite and a Samaritan, people knew what kind of people he was talking about. They could relate to them. Another example from Matthew chapter 22, should we pay the Roman tax? Whose image is on the coin? So give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's. So ask questions and tell stories. Questions make people think. It engages them much more than just telling them the answer to the question. So if you find yourself thinking, this person needs to understand that X is true, maybe that abortion hurts women, or that he was once a preborn child, instead of just stating what you want him to know, think, is there a question I can ask or a story I can tell that will lead him to make that conclusion for himself? For example, how do you think a mother might feel if she somehow accidentally runs over her child with her car? Well, terrible, of course. How do you think mothers feel when they look back on an abortion and realize that they are responsible for the death of their own child? Stories illustrate the point in a memorable way. Here's a quick story to illustrate a point, and this is a true story. I know of one case where a teenage girl and her father were living together. Mom was out of the picture, and they got into an incestuous relationship. She got pregnant and had an abortion. But then they got into counseling, stopped the incest, and were trying to build a healthy relationship. About a year after the abortion, though, the daughter is wanting to get pregnant again, so that this time she can do the right thing and have her baby. She doesn't have a boyfriend. All the counseling to end the incest is getting thrown out the window because of the abortion. Abortion did not fix the incest. It just made the situation worse. So just put that in your brain to remember. Ask questions, tell stories. Okay, one more thing to think about. Should we use pictures of aborted babies? I do want to assure you that there are no pictures of aborted babies on our display. In general, I want to attract people to our message rather than turn them away. We do have a picture of a healthy preborn child to depict the humanity of the preborn. However, pictures convey truth in a much more powerful way than words. We all learned about the Holocaust in school. What do you remember about that? Isn't it the pictures that really made an impression, rather than just being told that millions of Jews were sent to concentration camps and killed? If you saw the movie Schindler's List, isn't it the images you remember more than the dialogue? We show those pictures to school children because we want them to know the truth of what happened in Germany and Poland in the 1940s. The murder of Emmett Till in the 1950s was the catalyst for the civil rights movement, not because he was the only young black man who was brutally murdered in the South, but because his mother insisted on an open casket funeral so that the world could see what they did to her boy. America saw what discrimination could actually do to people. Maybe we need to show pictures of aborted babies so Americans will really understand what reproductive rights does to babies. Priests for Life does have pictures of aborted babies on their website because they feel that America will not end abortion until America sees abortion. And so there will be some pictures available at Christian Voice for Life tables, but no volunteer is by any means required to get them out and show them to anyone. If you don't want to use them, you don't have to. But if you get into a conversation where the Holy Spirit leads you to make use of that tool, then they will be available. The next slide shows some of those pictures because I do want you to see the truth of what abortion is. The first picture is the result of an abortion at 8 weeks with the tip of a pencil as a size reference, but you can still see those tiny little fingers and toes. The second trimester abortion is evidently the result of a saline abortion. And the final picture is the result of a late-term abortion. It's a lot easier to talk about abortion as a right when you don't see the reality of what abortion really is. Okay, the graphic pictures are gone now if you've had your eyes closed. Let's review the general strategies we will use as we discuss the morality of abortion, especially with those who are pro-choice. First, we listen. We care about them enough to respectfully listen and really try to understand where they're coming from. If we find out that they have a personal involvement with abortion, we switch our focus to ministering to them rather than debating with them. We look for common ground with the person we are speaking with. It is not necessary to bring God into the conversation to be able to defend the pro-life position, but if we do have the common ground of a strong Christian faith, we can certainly appeal to a religious view. We will consider how we can direct the conversation to the real question of what the unborn child is. We can often do that by comparing a crisis pregnancy to a similar situation with a small child. For example, if someone argues that the poor need abortion, we can ask if poverty would justify the killing of a newborn child. We keep in mind that two very effective strategies are to ask questions and tell stories. Finally, while we do not display graphic images and no volunteer is required to make use of them, they are part of the truth of abortion and can be useful in some cases to convey the reality of what abortion is. This concludes Part 1 of the Voice for Life training. In Part 2, we will deal in more detail with how to direct the discussion to the real question of what the preborn child is and how to answer specific pro-choice arguments. Thank you so much for your time in viewing this presentation. I hope it will be helpful for you as you act as a voice for life with the people you come in contact with.